All right, it's conference championship week. We got the Pac-12 title here on Friday night in Las Vegas. We got Utah taking on USC. Seeing the Trojans open as a 1.5-point favorite across the board, as you might expect after how well they've played these last few weeks. That's up to 2.5, and in total, as you might expect as well, pretty high at 67. That's moved up a tick as well. I faded USC a lot this year, and it hasn't really worked out. They have the Heisman Trophy winner playing quarterback. They got a lot of talent offensively. There's still one element of this team, though, that I'm not willing to concede has really changed my opinion. I think they got a bottom 30 defense in college football. They've created turnovers at an elite rate. I think some of that is luck, quite frankly, because they've really created them at really opportune times. Think back to the Oregon State game, the UCLA game, even last week against Notre Dame. If Drew Pine doesn't fumble that ball on the handoff in USC territory, that's a totally different game. I do think there's a little bit of luck involved there. We saw Utah totally shred USC back in Salt Lake earlier in the season. I mean, well over 500 yards in total. Cam Rising threw for over 400 yards by himself. I think that formula is quite repeatable in this matchup. So I can't fade USC in this spot, just given what they do have offensively. I am going to isolate Utah's team total, and it's going to be an official one-unit play for me. Utah team total over 31.5 is what I got it at. I think sentiment is a little bit down on Cam Rising and maybe just this Utah team in general. I will admit that Rising's made some big mistakes in Utah's biggest moments this year. You think back to the Florida game, that interception in the red zone that ultimately lost them that game, played really, really poorly against Oregon a few weeks ago. And I think that's really what's sticking in people's heads. I don't really worry about the turnovers with him all that much. I mean, he's been their starter the last 2 years, just 12 interceptions in that span. So, I do think USC can match up pretty well against the run in this matchup. I think Utah's run game has regressed from where it was a year ago. Just look at Tavion Thomas's numbers these past 2 years, and you'll see that. If anything, in my opinion, though, that's going to force Utah to just be more aggressive and play to their strengths in this matchup. This USC secondary is not good. A lot of the takeaway from last week when USC played Notre Dame was, all USC and all positive with them. Drew Pine went 23 of 26, threw for over 12 yards per attempt on this USC secondary. Drew Pine is not a good quarterback. That's concerning. We already saw Jack Plummer of Cal throw for over 400 yards against this unit. I mean, guys like Emory Jones from Arizona State, Jaden DeLora from Arizona, who, those guys can have their moments, but not world-beating players. USC secondary has been an issue all year. I just think some of this stuff about Cam Rising, the turnover issues, can he win the big game? I think it's overblown. From a matchup perspective, you're probably getting a top 15 offense in the country facing off with a bottom 30 defense. So getting this team total in the low 30s seemed a little bit low to me. And the other thing, too, that has to be said, if you're trusting an offense with your money, they got to be good up front. You could argue that Utah's gotten worse in the run blocking category this year, and I'm willing to admit that, but they've been pretty rock solid at protecting Rising all year. Back when they played USC earlier in the year, 0 sacks. Despite 44 pass attempts. So quite frankly, I think Rising throws for 4 or 5 touchdowns by himself. I think he probably cashes this bet alone. Maybe USC just is a team of destiny. Maybe they'll continue to luck their way to the playoff. Like I said, I've had no luck fading this team this year. The Trojans are probably going to need 38 to 40 plus points to win this game. I think 31.5 is just too low for Utah on that team total. So that's my best play in this game is the Utah team total over 31.5. Don't think the full game over is a terrible play because, I just don't trust Utah's defense. I mean, they too got kind of torched back when these two teams played in Salt Lake City. I don't think they're great off the edge this year. I think that secondary is beatable. And when you're talking about going up against Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison, Mario Williams, some of those playmakers that USC has got, that's not really the element of the matchup that I want to be trusting with my money. I'm isolating the matchup I like best. Utah team total over 31.5 is an official one-unit play for me.